Whether you're looking for a convenient refresher course, or a way to earn your Pragmatic certification at your own speed, or the chance to take a Pragmatic course from your specific corner of the world, then Foundations on Demand is the solution you need. Get the same great content, tools, and templates our Foundations course is famous for in a flexible and easy-to-use online learning platform. Learn the skills you need to build and market products people want to buy. And earn your Pragmatic Institute certification anywhere, anytime. No more travel worries, no more time zone issues, just truly great training. Experience the new way of training with Foundations on Demand from Pragmatic Institute. Visit pragmaticinstitute.com/foundations to learn more.
Excited for this session, and please everybody help me to welcome Pragmatic instructors Teresa Brazen and Cindy Cruzado. They're going to be sharing insights into how you can really supercharge your product and design collaborations, right? It's so important for us to leverage our complementary skill sets and really combine both those market and user insights from different perspectives so that we can build really exceptional products. Cindy and Teresa are an absolute blast. And in addition, they just casually bring over 40 years of combined experience to their role. So they have led product, design, creative leadership teams. They've really done it all. And they have a huge passion for creating solutions that satisfy and delight users, really address market problems, and achieve business objectives. So they're each really dedicated, and if you've ever had them in class, you know this already. They're so dedicated to helping others build strong bridges between product and design teams so that you can create really intuitive and innovative products. So that is more than enough from me. Welcome, Teresa and Cindy. I really can't wait for our group to hear from you. I always love hearing from you. So I'm going to pass the reins right over for you to further introduce yourselves and share more.
Thank you, Georgina. Wonderful to be here and to be partnering with one of my colleagues here, Teresa. I teach the product curriculum and have been in Pragmatic now for 6 years. That blows my mind that it's been 6 years. But before that, working in financial technology, meteorology, education, and everywhere, working collaboratively with design. So I'm excited to get into this conversation and share some of the product lens for sure on this whole topic.
All right. And thanks, Cindy. I'm Teresa Brazen. I am also an instructor for Pragmatic, and I teach on the design side. And I am also a leadership and executive coach. I work with design leaders and leadership teams. And I come from the world of design. I worked in 3 different agencies, I've both been on the project side of designing, working with design teams, but also on the education side and teaching the craft of design for many, many years. So I'm super excited to be here because, we'll get into it more, but collaboration is super, super important in the world of designing products and services, which you all know, but we're hoping that we will shed some new light on what that could really mean for you.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive right in. And let's kind of tee up the topic, why we really believe collaboration is the most powerful tool for product and design teams. And, I'll kind of kick this off by sharing, and I've seen some of the answers to that icebreaker question up here. From a product perspective, when we think about the ask that we are asking our design teams to kind of help facilitate thinking about solutions. There's a lot of context. There's a lot of information that we are responsible for bringing to the table, kind of the why, the what the problems are. And the more we do that in a collaborative way, the less of a shock it is to the system, the faster we actually start to move through everything. And we'll get into some of the details of that today. But I've seen firsthand how working collaboratively with design to get that grounding in the market and do some of that research together has really improved our efficiency and moving forward. It is a superpower, in terms of knowledge sharing, but it also inspires and results in a really collaborative, team effect. I don't know, Teresa, what you want to add to that?
Well, I was thinking, I always like to define my terms, even collaboration, because, if you think about collaboration as it's a practice, basically, where groups of people decide to work together toward a common goal or purpose, and in this instance, for the sake of some kind of business benefit. Collaboration is a requirement of the work that we do. We all know that. But so you can either collaborate reluctantly and have a really difficult time, or you can collaborate or you can embrace collaboration. And I was thinking about like, what are the qualities of good collaboration? And there's communication, which includes feedback, but there's also trust. Building trust with our partners, a safe space where people feel like they can share ideas openly, accountability, right? Which means personal responsibility. We're all bringing our A game, and also flexibility, which I think we'll probably get into a little bit later, because projects change and we need to be open to the ideas that our partners are putting on the table. There's also respect for, the partners that you have, and also the ideas that they're bringing to the table. And I would add a dash, in the best of worlds, positivity. So being, willing and able and interested in collaborating, as opposed to focused on the friction that is also going to be inevitable, and supporting and celebrating one another along the way. So it sounds idealized, but I think what we're going to be getting into is like, how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we help ourselves get there?
And you made me start to think about, the consequences of not doing this is another way to think about this too.
Yeah.
You get into that black box thinking where we're less transparent, we're maybe doing things redundantly when it comes to these roles in product and design. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of commonality, and we can result, if we're doing more black box thinking here, not collaborating, we can ultimately be resulting in inferior product outcomes, right? Putting the wrong products in the market, or products that are failing to meet expectations. So just a lot of reasons why this is so important.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing too. I think the thing I worry about in environments where there isn't good collaboration is that ultimately what happens is you don't leverage the expertise of everyone. You're leaving all these superpowers on the table because people aren't talking, and they're not realizing where one another could be contributing, or where you could be contributing together. And we don't want to do that, because and I know the key to really innovative ideas, a key to that is leveraging a diversity of ideas and the talents of a whole group of people, not just part.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I, as we go through, some specific areas here, these are meant to kind of just show a little bit of where the power of collaboration is really driving. But, from a product perspective, we're looking to solve problems, and that means come up with solutions that result in business benefit. And one of those is help us stand out in the market, give us competitive advantages. Not just fill gaps in our portfolios, but actually drive innovation. And it's through collaboration that we're going to learn what those things are, so that we can make the right choices, make the right decisions. And when we start to do that, the goals, the metrics around our products that we're striving to kind of hit the nail on the head with, better usage, better adoption. We're going to get there when we understand our market better, and we understand what they need, so that they're going to adopt it. And that's what we call the human-centered approach. When we bring that context of problems and personas into that innovation discussion with design, we're helping to achieve that adoption goal. But along with that comes, some small but mighty additional benefits. And that is, satisfaction grows when we're working with a solution that actually helps us with a task. It's a remarkable product that people actually want to use. That's going to translate to people wanting to buy more product, to work with the products longer, renew them. That's going to translate to them recommending it to other parts of our market. And so, from a product perspective, these are things that we're watching, we're striving for, we may be even being judged on, and we're going to get to these through collaboration with design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I personally am really, my personal mission is to help design teams thrive within organizations, right? And collaboration is a big key to that. And what I think when that's working really well, what happens is something I was speaking about before, there's an opportunity for design to fully flex, right? And some of the skill sets that they can be bringing to the table are not. I think there's a lot of organizations where sometimes product management doesn't even realize ways that design could be supporting their work and supercharge what they are trying to do. So, for example, design is design teams are really good at understanding human behavior and goals and pain points. And I think there are a lot of instances where design isn't brought in early enough to help inform that perspective for an organization. So, a benefit of this kind of collaboration that we're exploring is bringing design in earlier so that you can leverage the expertise more. And the impact is that you're going to end up designing products or putting products and services out into the market that just resonate more with people. Right? Like, not just that people will buy them, but they use them a lot and they love them and they advocate for them. And you can't do that without a really healthy understanding of your audience. And that's one of the superpowers of design. So that's what I would add.
One of those areas you just triggered a thought here, that is very true. I hear in class all the time is that design is a little bit of a mystery. And what you were just saying, is how can design help me, and being able to understand human behavior. There's a kind of a lack of concrete knowledge on what that really means and why it's so important to engage design early. That really resonates.
Yeah, and I think, another thing that leveraging your design team can do, it can help you stay really honest as an organization. And what I mean by that is there is well, I think we'll get into this a little bit later too, but there's a tendency for all people to really hyper focus on their own business or their own part of the business. That's just a natural human tendency. That means that businesses have a tendency to want to convince themselves that markets and human beings want things that they want to sell to them, right? Because it's in the best interest of the business. And if you're leveraging your design team well and the tools of design in collaboration with them, those tools help you to keep that in check. And it's important because it doesn't matter how great an idea is from a business perspective. If people won't buy it or use it or advocate for it, it's going to end up dying on the vine.
Yeah. Yeah. And where design thinks broader about experiences too, it really starts to keep us consistent as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into the steps, right? We talk about these all the time, but what are the first steps to supercharging product and design collaboration? Love that. Well, first of all, some of the things we've talked about already when we think about getting to know your designers and recognizing that, honestly, we come from the same understanding. There's a lot of differences between these roles. There's a lot of different things that we learned in school. These roles are very independent, have kind of matured over time in different ways. But these roles both embrace this outside-in approach. Okay, and as I see several of you, there's overlap Yes, it's good overlap. We both, as these roles, want to understand the market, want to understand problems so well that we dream up the best solutions that are going to surprise and delight, even exceed expectations of those roles in our market we care about. And when we think about, the lack of understanding of roles, when this black box thinking, we tend to miss out on this shared understanding and realize that we're really starting from a pretty foundational, common understanding and desire to have data to drive outside-in decisions rather than inside out. And leveraging that understanding of design is going to get us there much faster when you think about this from a product perspective.
Agreed.
But when we think about, curiosity, and we think about the things that you can specifically do, right? You're going to build, as a product leader, you're going to build stronger partnerships by understanding a few very concrete things, okay? So, how do your designers actually fit into the whole practice of developing product? And I think one of the key takeaways here that we both said is that we've got to think about them much early on. When we're getting out to the market and collaborating, we need a shared understanding. I learned a long time ago that there's a lot of contextual inquiry skill sets that designers have that help us get more out of these Nahito interviews that we're doing. I've come away, when I've partnered with designers on those calls, I've come away with more learnings, more depth, more understanding. And at the same time, if we're doing it together, in that research we're doing, we're getting a shared understanding of that. I think along with this goes us understanding what kind of skill sets do we have. There's a whole ecosystem of designers. Who are we working with? Who do we need now on the release? Who do we need next in the sequence in our roadmap? And, product can be thinking it ahead and working with design organizations to make sure that we've got the right skill sets that we need. And at the same time, we should be empowered to be working with designers on a lot of different activities to facilitate that. There are times when we don't get access to design skills. How can we learn from working with designers so that on the next project, when we don't have a designer, we can actually keep that kind of consistency going? And I know there's another perspective of this, right? I'll let Teresa speak to us.
Yeah, and just to zoom out for 1 second, I think what you're getting at, Cindy, is just also having a good practice of doing stakeholder interviews, and that I would include in that interviewing some of your key partners before you kick off an initiative. And I come from the agency world, and in agency land, you always have to do a really robust set of stakeholder interviews because you're from outside the organization, right? And you have to learn, you have to figure out who's most important from a hierarchy perspective, who's most important from an influence perspective and an expertise perspective. So just to make sure this is clear, like one of the things that I think we would both advocate for is that you're creating in a way like a stakeholder map and a partner map, right? When you kick off projects and thinking about those three levels of hierarchy, influence, and expertise. So, for example, my recommendation to designers would be when starting a new initiative is doing a little map like that to determine who in the product management side is it important for them to get to know. And some of the things that, I would encourage them to explore are making sure they understand how do our product management partners think about the product development process. Cindy and I will talk in a little bit about how it's probably a little bit different than how design thinks about it, but there are actually some overlaps. And understanding, how do our product management partners typically learn about customer needs? And, that can be a really rich discussion where a designer can also share ways that they might also be able to contribute that they may or may not be doing, in past projects. And also, I love this third question around where is product management now? Where does it want to be? So this zoom out of trying to understand how do our product management partners think about their function inside of the organization and where are they trying to head? Because that gives us as designers an opportunity to look for ways that we can support that. And then metrics, I think, is another really interesting place to explore, to understand, how does product management approach metrics? And also there can be a conversation about ways that design might approach metrics. So, for example, maybe the design team is using Google's Heart metrics, which is a way of measuring human impact. And there could be a conversation about how that might be woven into metrics for the project moving forward. But I love this idea that we're both getting at of getting to know your partners up front and learning more about the similarities and differences in the ways that you think about designing products and getting them out into the world.
And I think implied in that is trying to learn what's going to help your partner be successful.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is a process that we move through, and largely we are bringing the context of a problem space to our teams as a product leader. This is the vision of the product. These are the goals that we're expected to help drive for the business with our product. And we're identifying market problems. We've been speaking to how collaborative this aspect is, right? It should never be a shock to our team that here's the problems, the problem space that we want to share. But then we go through an evaluation of quantifying those market problems, and this again is where we're leveraging the expertise of product and design to really start to explore and understand and get to, which of those problems are the most important to pursue. Now, a lot of this in some teams and some organizations happens way before the design and the development team gets even involved. But look at how much context all of this has and how it's going to, not only help designers really understand what success is all about, but the rationale that's gone into thinking about why are we prioritizing in the bottom of this picture here, the ones that we're prioritizing, kind of get into that context. We are treating our designers as a partner if we're involving them. They're seeing the magic behind our curtain of how this process works. And they're starting to understand the business impact, the meaning that they can deliver. I've personally seen designers kind of question and say, well, if you looked at it differently, maybe we could do more than one of these problems if we approach the design in a more consistent way. And so this is speaking to what we were just talking about, getting involved a little bit early. But this is that the evolution of this is what's kind of landing in our team's laps, our designers' laps, as how do we now innovate and think about solutions, right? I don't know what you want to chime in on here.
Well, I think I'd like to go to the next slide because it relates to this slide. I appreciate you mentioned, all organizations are also different, and even what product management is different in different organizations, right? And how design and product management play together is different. And in some cases, like you mentioned, design would get brought in kind of at the end of that funnel that you just shared with us. And you mentioned that if you don't know, news alert, design really wants to be involved much earlier in that funnel. They want to be involved in the first part and the second part and the third part because it can help. What's interesting is I was talking earlier about the differences in the way maybe the two groups think about the product, the process or the approach. This double diamond, if you aren't familiar with it, is in general how most design teams think about designing products and developing them. And it came out of the British Design Council. And there's a few, and I'm going to describe it quickly, but then make sure that I explain the relationship to what you just saw a minute ago. There's these two diamonds, and the first one is focused on strategy. So design's doing research to understand, and maybe in partnership with product management, again, depends on the organization. But in an ideal world, design is a part of research, and they're using the research to understand goals, behaviors, pain points of the target audience. And then they explore and then they hone in on, they define a set of problems that are real and meaningful problems for those human beings, and work with product management and other groups or entities in the organization to determine which problems are the ones that really should be focused on. What problems should we solve? I think there's a difference there. Sometimes that in product management may think of that as their space and their place to play, and design really wants to be a part of that too, because they're really good at all the things I've been saying. But once that is determined, then they move into the explore, which is about generating lots of ideas for how a product could be designed, or even multiple ways of approaching the product to solve for that problem, and then move into the creation phase. And what you notice here is there's sort of the strategy and execution phase. And design is often, I think, seen as living mostly in the execution, but want to be over here too, and can meaningfully contribute over here too. And also there's this divergent and convergent thinking that's a part of how designers work, which is going wide, generating or doing lots of exploration or generating lots of ideas and then honing in. And, I think when design teams are not invited to participate in the first diamond, that can cause distress for design teams. And that can be a big part of eroding the potential for collaboration inside of an organization. Mm-hmm. I'm curious how the people that are watching, how their organizations approach this. But, and the last thing is to bring it back to that last slide. I think of it as rather than a funnel that then leads to that second diamond, the two really should overlap.
They should. And I want to hone in on a word that you just mentioned, and that's distress. One of the ways that, we know that user research is an important component to understanding the market, but who owns user research is a real stressful topic. In the world of design and in product. And it feels like our role is defined by who gets to do Nihito activities, who gets to do these ride-alongs. Right. And what we're both saying here is that it should not be that way. It should be a common understanding. It's not who gets to do the interviews, it's who's understanding the market and how do we get a shared understanding of the market? Yeah. And just to bring it home a little bit, when Teresa says, designers really want to be in that left diamond, we've overlaid this with the pragmatic framework. So folks, we can broaden our thinking from just execution with design to say, as we are exploring the market, absolutely, how do we come up with a set of questions together that we can get answers to? How do we divide and conquer and go out and do the research or partner up on certain things? But it goes beyond that. It goes into how do we then prioritize and start to think about, the goals we're trying to get to. And you get into the focus and the business categories of the pragmatic framework. There are a lot of great activities there that we should be partnering with or getting input from both sides of this so that we get to that vision and plan and we're of one mind. Mm-hmm. That's superpower, right? We're going to move faster in that second diamond when we have one common understanding.
Well, and to throw a wild card in there too, I mean, I would even encourage you, if this isn't happening now, to consider bringing letting engineering be a part of, or at least observe some of what's happening in research while it's happening. And it's for the same reason that you just said, this product design and development works best when everybody has a really cohesive understanding of who the target audience is. Mm-hmm. And they don't know it, they know it in a more internalized way. So when our engineers have that kind of knowledge, they can make better decisions when they're doing what they do. And same thing with design too.
That's right. Let's go a little deeper on this one too, right? So when we start to overlap the framework and we start to think about roles and responsibilities, clearly there's a lot of work here. There's a lot of different things that we are trying to do. And in most teams, there's no expectation that you do every one of the 37 activities in the framework. In fact, we're sharing the load, and that's important. And so there's this clarity that we need to get into, which is who's owning what in terms of, the driver of those activities. And it's not so clear as to say that the what we do is owned by product. It's really driving it forward, but working with others to really start to collect the information to help us figure out what that is, what market segments, what problems, which personas. But then you get into execution, and there's a whole lot of different roles. The same thing applies when we get into execution. And what you see in this picture is kind of these different roles kind of being highlighted of who's getting involved most often in driving that collaboration. So, on the bottom of the framework, when we're really into the solution development, the refinement of different solutions and evaluation, we've got different kinds of designers, interaction designers, we've got architects. We've got visual designers, industrial designers, right? Participating in a lot of different parts of this conversation. When we get products and we start to drive them out to the market, we're doing testing and prototyping and we're doing usability research, right? Different hats that we're wearing, different roles that are going to help with that. So we've talked a lot about the research, but this continues as we go through the execution of this as well. I see that we've dropped the Exploring Design ebook into chat as well for a little bit of additional context for you. So how do we get to this? All right. How can teams align product management and design approaches to product development? And when I want to broaden this from we're not talking just software development here. We're talking about, services, maybe components as well. But there's specific things that we need to do in order to get to this space of a shared understanding. And I think one of the first things is, roles and responsibilities need to be clarified, but we have to let go of this idea of total ownership, right? Just because part of our job description is to do user research or is to evaluate solutions or to evaluate innovation meetings. And I just talked about product and design there when mentioning those tasks. Just because that's part of our job description doesn't mean we unilaterally own it and nobody else has a say in it. And I think this is a mindset that in order to get the power out of this collaboration, we've got to go in there leveraging the clarity of job descriptions, but also figuring out how do we dig in and, respect what people are bringing to the table, but also feel empowered and safe to challenge that and start to drive that kind of collaborative understanding. I know that in a very specific way, mapping the activities at a granular level inside some of the, the development of requirements, the facilitation of innovation, design sessions, and mapping who's going to do what, who's going to participate, who's going to kind of enable that, who's going to drive it, is getting to clarity so that we can actually get the job done with that. Capturing what the team needs to understand around driving that innovation process. It's not just writing a problem requirement that captures the problem from the persona's point of view, but it's also getting into facilitating the discussion. There's a lot of different ways that we do this. Experience mapping is something that I know that our designers are fabulous partners in kind of helping us get the most out of understanding where problems are occurring and kind of looking at it from different angles. But we need to make sure that we're helping them set up the scenarios, getting access to the market so that we get that shared understanding. That's one tool, experience mapping. There are many others, I know, Teresa.
Yeah, I mean, there's so ideation workshops, I think, which is sort of implied by this slide. Problem framing workshops is another one where you can come together and workshop which problems you should be solving. Even, prototyping can be a shared collaborative activity. We've talked a lot about research and even co-creation activities with your existing audience, where you invite them in, maybe you even have them map out the current state experience with you as a cross-functional team. So there are lots and lots of tools, ways that we can be collaborating together.
One of the things from a product perspective that, when we are listening to the market, whether it's shared, whether it's sharing the information back to our team. One of the things that we have to learn is not just what the problem is, but why it's a problem. And I think it's the why that really dovetails with what we've been talking about here from a design perspective around goals, around motivation. And so bringing that why into this process and this conversation and these tactics that we're talking about is critical. You know, what's the consequence? What's the negative consequence of a problem, right? Why is it so impactful? Why is it frustrating, confusing? What's the consequence of not getting a task done? I think that information is something that, you know, if we're partnering with design, we're probably learning about it more in a more detailed way, but we should definitely be bringing that to the table because it helps our teams really solidify their understanding of what is important and why it is important. It's easy to say why, but what does that mean, right? It truly means getting into an understanding of why not solving the problem is a really negative consequence. And, you know, drilling down to this a little bit more, there's a lot of things we learn as we go through this.
The viability, desirability, feasibility. So, you know, I love this model because it's really simple in a way. You know, when I look at this, what this represents to me is, in a way, three parts of business trying to come together to collaborate in an ideal world for the best solution that leverages the perspective and expertise of each of these groups. And so desirability is, I think designers tend to think of themselves as living in this space. It's really focusing on the human beings who are going to buy and use and hopefully advocate for the products that we create. Viability is focusing on business, right? And whatever we put out in the market has to ensure that we can turn the lights on and pay salaries, right? And then the bottom, feasibility. So, you know, it has to be technically feasible. Can our engineering team develop this? Do we have the tools that we need to make it happen? And I think, you know, in a lot of organizations, these are very siloed groups. The structure of the organization does not naturally bring them together. And if that's the case in your organization, then you have to be very intentional about crossing over the divide and looking for these moments of collaboration, finding collaborative activities that you can do to make sure that the perspectives are all coming to the same, you know, are all being brought forth. And you know, I talked about this a little bit before. I think the other thing that whenever I see this, that it reminds me of is, you know, we all naturally will orient toward the circle that defines our role in an organization. And if we want to be really excellent collaborators and really good product managers and really good designers, we're going to look for ways to get outside of that bubble in service of the shared goals that we all have, you know, of having a thriving business. And tools like personas and scenarios, for example, I think are great tools for design tools that can be used. Well, design, no, I'm going to try not to like put ownership on those. They can be used to help make tough decisions when you're trying to navigate this, right? Because what happens is nobody ever gets what they want. Right? It's never 100% what's right for the user. It's never 100% what's right for the business. And it's never 100% what the engineering team thinks we should be doing. There's a negotiation that happens at many, many points throughout a project, right? And just thinking back to where we started, the strength of our relationships is what helps us navigate that.
Yeah.
If you don't have strong relationships, you all know, you've been on these projects where one arm isn't talking to the other, and yet you're supposed to create something together. It's really difficult.
Yeah. 100% on everything you were talking about. What we're looking at also is a little deeper into the development process here, right? We've been, user research kind of comes prior to deciding what we're going to be building. And as we go through, there's a lot of prototyping and feedback in order to figure out the answers to, is this desirable? Can we actually build it? And I want to just highlight that, we don't have resources for a finite amount of time sometimes. Sometimes we're limited on our access to design skill sets. Sometimes they're not, advocated for our team, and we're doing it alone. And so the way to stretch this common understanding is to be of one mind, and is to have this gel of an understanding of the market, so that when design resources are stretched thin, that we can continue to go through and understand and work in this way, and step up to the plate as a product person and be the one getting out in the market and getting that prototype feedback, bringing it back to the team so the team can kind of keep marching forward. We have to pinch hit a little bit is what I'm saying here sometimes. And that doesn't happen unless we intentionally collaborate and have a good understanding of what we're trying to do. And any effective team is going to be effective because we've got the structure, we've got the roles and responsibilities figured out, but we also have a lot of trust that we can step in and we can do different parts of this and keep moving forward. So a lot of good takeaways here. I'll kind of take the first one here, but we've talked a lot about breaking down silos. Okay. Maybe, painting a rosy picture of what you're working towards, but it is a struggle for a lot of teams to build that culture, build that trust. We're never going to get there unless we intentionally figure out who we're working with, get to know our designers, and look intentionally at ways where we can get to this leveraging of outside-in thinking in a common place. That's called building and designing a sandbox of collaboration. And start small, but it's pretty mighty as we start to work through that.
And I would say second point, I think we've talked about this in a bunch of different ways, but is both design and product management learning more about how each other work and your processes and approach and the possible activities that could be a part of the way that you move forward. And, maybe on a goal I would offer is on each project that you do, try to use a new collaborative activity of some sort so that you expand your range and your team continues to expand its range. And then I'll leave the last one to you because I think, Cindy, you said it really well earlier.
Yeah, let go of control. This idea of we do research and you listen to what we're saying, that's old school, folks. Okay. Control is for amateurs. It is much more effective, absolutely, to figure out who we're working with, get a shared understanding of success. And while we have different jobs to do, we have different primary responsibilities, let's figure out intentionally how we're going to drive that shared understanding. When you do that, you're singing on the same song sheet here and moving forward in a strong collaboration with design.
Which also makes me think about this definition of leadership that I love, which is leadership is the process of social influence, leveraging something like leveraging the expertise of others toward a common goal. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way, what we're talking about is a kind of leadership that's about really leveraging and maximizing the full range of the team that's available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, folks, we are going to transition into our Q&A. And I also see a number of questions in here already that I'm really excited to tackle with these ladies. And I have a couple private questions as well as some from our LinkedIn Live viewers. So excited for those. If you've got questions, now is the time to pop them into the Q&A box so we can make sure to flag them for Cindy and Teresa. And I am so excited to dive into some of these questions for both of you. So the first one that I will pose is a little bit of a brainstorming or like a guesstimate question about some of the challenges with where design is brought into the process. So Teresa, you were talking about how design wants to be earlier in the process, right? And some of the folks that are joining us on this session through our LinkedIn Live broadcast asked, what are your theories about why this problem has kind of developed and why this trend seems to be around, right? And the asker said, for lack of a better word, why does this have such a perennial nature that it continues to be a challenge?
I can start, and Cindy, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say to this too. One thing I would say is, I think first of all, there are many people who don't actually know they don't fully understand what design is or can be. So there's a limited understanding that the what's in scope for design is right here in some people's perspective. So I think just like shared understanding of what design is not always there. And that oftentimes is influenced by organizational structure. I'll give an example or organizational culture. I was talking with someone the other day, and I said, I work with design teams and design leadership to try to help them elevate their influence and the role of design. And he was like, design's not strategic. And I was like, oh. And, I could hear the groans of all the designers in the world at the same time. And, in the design community, we think we've made progress on this. And then I hear stuff like that. I'm like, oh my God. And the reason as I dug a little further, he was like, every organization I've been in design, they just make the things that we tell them to make. That's basically what he said. And, and then I learned that the organizations that he had been working in were very, very heavily engineering driven. So culturally, there was a different sort of value and priority in the organization, and that influences perception of design. And then also, of course, if there's very few resources and not very many designers representing design, that affects people's perception. There's so much more. I'm going to throw it to you for a minute, Cindy, and I'm going to keep thinking.
Yeah.
It's a huge question.
Where is design brought in, and kind of why are we perpetuating this kind of difference here? It has a lot to do with the maturity of the organization too. And, when I've worked in a lot of startups that have grown to be massive organizations or bought by other companies and different business units. And, frankly, when you start out and you're building a product, you don't often have a designer. All right. Frankly, you might not even have the product manager. And so as these roles come on board, it's as if you have to win the job back. You have to carve out what's being done today, and you have to kind of define and show the potential because you're now on board. And even in a large organization, we have these reorganizing moments where we're shifting around the organization. We report to different leaders. Those are opportunities to say, what does design mean for us? What is product doing here? How can we leverage commonality? And so it doesn't matter where you are coming in and where your organization is maturity-wise. Be the product leader that sits down and says, there's more power here that we can leverage. How do we get there? But you're not alone. This is a very common thing that we don't define it and it's perfect and it will stay that way. We've got to keep at it because we've got different leaders that come in. We've got different influences that are going to change our thinking. It's just a mindset that we want to grow this superpower, and collaboration is the way to make it happen.
And I would add too, I think, the design community is still trying to figure out how to sort of prove the value of design through metrics. And, metrics are like the love language of our business stakeholders. And so we've made progress on that, but that's why I was talking about if you're a designer and your product management partners have never used any kind of metrics to measure, human impact. I give the example of the HEART metric or framework that came out of Google. Then there's a great opportunity to have a conversation about that and see if you can start to integrate some of that into the way that you're working, because the more we can sort of point to, and the challenge is it's really difficult with design. It's challenging to point and say, this aspect of what we designed caused, $1 million in sales. It's hard to it's a longer link, a longer chain to get to that. So I think that's some of the challenge too, is, we're still, as a community, we've gotten a lot better, but, in the organizations where there are designers that are really good at that, it makes a difference.
I think we're also touching on a couple of things here, getting real for a moment. We don't have enough resources. We got to move fast. We are limited in what we can do. And I think that just points to how much more important it is to flex.
Yeah.
It is to understand where our commonality is and to think about, for the project, the release that we're working on, how do we get the most out of the resources that are coming to the table? And rather than looking at and documenting, here's the way we do it on this team and it's effective, and we should do it exactly the same way over here with a different set of resources. There's a little more flexibility and the kind of thinking about metrics, thinking about the work that you're doing, and kind of figuring out what's right for your team at what time is really what we're starting to advocate for here.
Mm-hmm. Such great thoughts. And I have two more questions that I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with. So the first one is really touching on kind of what you talked about, Cindy, with the ongoing nature of beating that drum of the relationship and finding where things plug in. So the question is, when you're thinking about this collaboration from strategy all the way to execution, how do you initiate and plant and build ownership for all of your team members through the process? What are some strategies and tactics that have worked really well, kind of at different stages of building that relationship and strengthening that relationship, and then also pushing it forward?
Mm-hmm. Well, it starts with understanding the business goals, having a product strategy that is actually connected to those business goals. If we feel like we're out in left field and what the team is actually working on it all the way through those different phases, it's never going to feel and never going to gel. There's always going to be things that come in and kind of shift priorities or don't feel right. So you've got to start by making sure everybody is on the same page with what success looks like, what the business goals are, what the time frame is that we are kind of developing our product strategy. And we wear different hats as we move through that, right? We talk about in Foundations the gap analysis, and it's one of the first things that I would refer to here is how do we get to that shared understanding of who's going to do what? When you can kind of eliminate the gray areas in roles and responsibilities, I think people feel more comfortable that they know what their individual roles are, but you also have to set those shared goals. And maybe it's at the release level. Maybe it's as we get into execution, it's getting down into the phases, the sprints, and starting to break it down, but being the one that kind of connects all of those pieces of execution back up to strategy. These are conversations that we can have along the way, make intentional space for those, so that it feels like everything that we're doing is connected and that it's real. Now, when I say we, I mean design and product coming together and kind of sharing that responsibility kind of along the way. There's innovation meetings that are specific opportunities to build into your sprints and iterations that will kind of bring people together, kind of pull up a little bit from the detail, reconnect with the personas, the problems, the strategy, think ahead 2 or 3 sprints from your team so that you've got the context for them when you need to go when they get there. I think there's also a lot of shared responsibility here. You don't have to be the ones doing it all. But at the end of the day, getting very real, we don't have enough resources at all of these phases, so we have to divide it up. But if we've got a common vision on where we're headed, we'll actually get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And inviting participation at key points. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I think, in what you're, so that, I mean, just a human nature, when you are invited to participate and have a perspective, then you are more enrolled in whatever happens next, even if it's not what you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But ownership is key, right? We all should be very clear what our primary responsibility is and then look for the intention in that collaboration.
Yeah. All right, we've got one last question. This one's for you, Teresa, to bring us home. This is a little bit of a what if question, and it might be a tricky one. So if you were a design team of 1 supporting 4 Scrum teams, If you had to eliminate all design work except for what is absolutely critical, what would you keep?
Well, first, I would tell you to go read the book Design or as UX Team of One by Leah Bewley, who I used to work with. And it's like the book for anyone who is a design team of one, which you may already know about. I mean, that's a tricky question. Some of the things that come up are, I think you have to have, this is going back to some of what you were just talking about, Cindy, you have to have clarity about business goals. You have to have clarity about your audience. So who is it that you are trying to sell something to? You can't, at the end of the day, that's the question. That's the $1 million question. And what is it that they will buy and love and tell everybody else about? So you have to do some kind of research or leverage research that already exists. There's a lot more to that. I'm sure the person who asked that question knows that there's a lot more to that. And then you need some kind of representation of what you understand about those people. So it could be a proto persona, which is a not highly researched form of persona that is a synthesis of what we do know about them. Or it can be a much more robust type of persona, or you need some kind of tool that communicates that, and that needs to be shared. And I think the bigger challenge with that, see, my list is going to be much longer than this person wants. The bigger challenge with that is you can't just make the tool. You have to get people to buy into it and to use it. Otherwise, you just wasted all your time. Mm-hmm. There's so many examples of persona. I can't tell you how many organizations I've interacted with where they did all this research and created personas and then they sat on a shelf. I would argue for some kind of, I don't know if it's a workshop, some kind of activity to introduce the personas, and they do an empathy exercise. Think, for example, of what would they feel, think, and do in a high stakes situation, so that people really get who they are and then start using them. And I would also say I really believe in ideation workshops being a cross-functional experience. I think it's really good to get a diversity of perspectives and cognitive diversity in the room, people who think about things in different ways. And it's another key point of, we talked about like inviting participation so that people are on board with wherever you go. Because after ideation, after that workshop, you may do something that they did not at all think was a good idea, but they will be more likely to support you in it. And then some kind of testing. There's a multitude of ways to prototype and test, but I'm a big advocate of very early prototyping, really rough, like let's make sure we're going the right direction. That's a really tough call. Read the book though, because Leah Bewley has a perspective on how to empower people in your position.
I think our last question might have accidentally been the title of our next presentation. Because I think that there's so much here, and I love that topic, and so it pains me to stop the conversation. But I noticed that we're at the top of the hour, and so time flies when you are learning and having a wonderful collaborative time with both of you. So Cindy, Teresa, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. For folks who joined us, for product managers, if you want to dive in and learn more, design for product professionals is a great course for you. And for designers, I really recommend business strategy and design. So thank you both for being here with us. There's so many great comments in the chat here about people that have learned a ton. So thank you.